In the third age of Middle-earth, behind walls of black stone and armies of countless orcs, sat the most powerful being in Middle-earth, Sauron, the Dark Lord. His strength seemed absolute, his dominion inevitable. Yet even this mighty being, who had walked the earth since its creation, harbored deep fears. These weren't merely concerns, but terrors that shaped his every action and decision. But what could possibly cause the mighty Dark Lord to cower in fear? To understand Sauron's fears, we must first understand his power. Before the world was made, Sauron was a Maya, a powerful spirit who helped shape the universe itself. He served Aule, the great craftsman of the Valar, learning arts of creation and manipulation that would later serve his dark ambitions. But Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, seduced him with promises of greater power and control. In the first age of Middle-earth, Sauron became Morgoth's most trusted lieutenant. He commanded fortresses, led armies, and mastered the arts of deception. He fought alongside the dragons and Balrogs, terrorizing the realms of elves and men. When the Valar finally defeated Morgoth in the War of Wrath, Sauron fled. During the Second Age, Sauron re-emerged. He approached the elves of Eregion, and for 300 years he taught them the craft of ring-making, secretly planning their downfall. After all 19 rings of power were completed, he forged the one ring in Mount Doom, revealing his true nature. When the elves refused to submit, he launched a war that devastated Middle-earth. Later, captured and brought to Númenor as prisoner, he slowly corrupted the greatest kingdom of men from within, then returned to Middle-earth once more. Though he was defeated by the last alliance of elves and men centuries later, the ring preserved his spirit. It was Gil-galad, elven king and Elendil of Westernesse, who overthrew Sauron, though they themselves perished in the deed, and Isildur, Elendil's son, cut the ring from Sauron's hand and took it for his own. Then Sauron was vanquished, and his spirit fled and was hidden for long years, until his shadow took shape again in Mirkwood. By the Third Age, Sauron had amassed more military might than any force since the First Age. His fortress of Barad-dûr rose like a spear of iron against the sky, built with such powerful sorcery that it could only stand while its master lived. From this impenetrable stronghold, he commanded vast armies of orcs, trolls, and corrupted men. The Nazgûl, his deadliest servants, spread terror across the lands. Trolls answered his call. Evil men from the east and south pledged their loyalty to him. As one of the Maiar, Sauron's true power was far beyond military might. His immortal nature meant no physical destruction could end him. When his body was destroyed in Númenor's fall, he simply reformed in Middle-earth. When he chose to walk among other beings, he could take any form he desired. As Anatar, he appeared as a radiant being to the elves, earning the title Lord of Gifts. When raw force was not an option, his voice became his deadliest weapon, swaying entire kingdoms with carefully chosen words. The kings of Númenor themselves succumbed to his persuasion, following his counsel until their pride and ambition led them to sail west and challenge the very gods themselves. Despite all his power, Sauron's first and oldest fear stemmed from the Valar themselves, the godlike beings who shaped the world. He had witnessed firsthand their devastating might in the War of Wrath at the end of the First Age. The Valar's armies descended from the west, their power so immense it shattered mountain ranges. Their wrath destroyed his master Morgoth's fortress of Angband, its iron towers crumbling to dust. The war ended with Morgoth cast into the eternal void, while his surviving allies and servants fled into the shadows. When the dust settled, Sauron approached Eönwë, herald of the Valar. Fear, not remorse, drove him to renounce his evil deeds. But Eönwë could only direct him to return to Valinor for the Valar's judgment, for a herald did not have the power to pardon such crimes. As Sauron stood among the ruins of his master's realm, looking at the utter devastation around him, two paths lay before him. The memories of his earliest days serving in the halls of Aule stirred within him. But the thought of kneeling before the Valar, of surrendering his power and accepting their authority once more, filled him with unbearable dread. Instead of facing judgment, he fled into the wild lands of Middle-earth, vanishing into darkness while the Valar's armies withdrew across the sea. Then Sauron was ashamed, and he was unwilling to return in humiliation and to receive from the Valar a sentence, it might be, of long servitude in proof of his good faith. For under Morgoth, his power had been great. Therefore, when Eönwë departed, he hid himself in Middle-earth, and he fell back into evil, for the bonds that Morgoth had laid upon him were very strong. In the Second Age, driven by this ambition for absolute dominion, Sauron enacted his greatest plan and created his greatest vulnerability. Using the arts learned from Aule, he forged the One Ring in the fires of Mount Doom. Into this simple band of gold, he poured much of his own power and malice. The ring amplified his strength enormously. It allowed him to dominate the minds of those who wore the other rings of power, extending his influence across Middle-earth. But this act created a fatal weakness. By investing so much of himself into the ring, Sauron bound his power to its existence. If the ring were destroyed, much of his strength would vanish with it. He believed this an acceptable risk. Who would choose to destroy such a powerful weapon rather than use it? There was another weakness. If the One Ring was actually unmade, annihilated, then its power would be dissolved. Sauron's own being would be diminished to vanishing point, and he would be reduced to a shadow, a mere memory of malicious will. This vulnerability haunted his every decision since. After Isildur cut the ring from his hand at the end of the Second Age, Sauron's physical form shattered like glass. Though his spirit endured, the loss drove him into hiding. For centuries he dwelt in the east, formless and powerless, while his servants searched endlessly for his missing ring. When he finally rebuilt his strength enough to return, the overwhelming fear of the ring's destruction shaped his entire kingdom. In the Third Age, he began reconstructing Barad-dûr on its ancient foundations, the very stones still bound by the ring's power. The Black Gate, called Morannon, stretched like an unbreakable wall between the mountains of ash and the mountains of shadow. Its iron doors towered between two great watchtowers, the Towers of the Teeth, built long ago by Gondor, but now serving a darker master. Legions of orcs patrolled every path and valley leading to Mount Doom, ensuring no one could approach the volcano unseen. Beyond these physical defenses, Sauron's paranoia extended far beyond Mordor's borders. He built a new network of spies stretching from the corsairs of Umbar to the wild men of Dunland. Every prisoner brought to Barad-dûr faced torture not just for military secrets, but for any whisper of a golden ring. The Nazgûl searched the Gladden fields where Isildur had fallen. When they found nothing, Sauron sent them to hunt through the Shire, following rumors of a magic ring. Even during his greatest military campaigns, this obsession never wavered. When he launched attacks against Gondor, he always kept enough forces in Mordor to guard the mountain. Even at the height of battle, patrols never ceased their endless circles around the volcano's base. The very air above Mount Doom churned with dark fumes, making it impossible for eagles or other large birds to approach unseen. The Dark Lord's fear proved well-founded, though not in the way he expected. His vast preparations, the fortresses, the armies, the spies, the constant patrols, all protected against the might of armies and the strength of kingdoms. Yet parallel to these physical threats, another kind of danger demanded his vigilance. Sauron's attention fixed constantly on few beings in Middle-earth who could truly challenge him. While lesser creatures, orcs, trolls, or common men, could never master the ring's full might, certain individuals possessed both the power and wisdom to wield it against its maker. Unless some other seized it and became possessed of it. If that happened, the new possessor could, if sufficiently strong and heroic by nature, challenge Sauron, become master of all that he had learned or done since the making of the One Ring, and so overthrow him and usurp his place. This was the essential weakness he had introduced into his situation in his effort. Gandalf the Grey posed the first and oldest threat. Like Sauron himself, Gandalf was a Maya who had witnessed the world's shaping, and Gandalf possessed one of the rings of power, Narya. These similarities made him particularly dangerous. He could master the ring's power in ways no mortal could comprehend. This fear drove Sauron to corrupt Saruman, the head of Gandalf's order, turning a powerful ally into a weapon against his own kind. In the golden woods of Lothlorien dwelt another threat, Galadriel, who had seen the light of paradise itself in the First Age. Her realm already defied his dominion through the power of Nenya, one of the 3 elven rings. The thought of her claiming the One Ring filled Sauron with dread. Unlike mortal men who could be corrupted by promises of power, Galadriel had already refused greater temptations. Her wisdom, combined with the ring's power, might prove unstoppable. Elrond of Rivendell represented another potential wielder that haunted Sauron's thoughts. As one who had witnessed the ring's first claiming, who had stood beside Isildur at the very precipice of Mount Doom, Elrond possessed both the wisdom to understand the ring's true nature and the power to potentially master it. His realm of Imladris had already proven itself beyond Sauron's reach, protected by powers the Dark Lord could not easily overcome. The thought of such a realm's master claiming the ring was particularly troubling, as Elrond's intimate knowledge of its history might have given him unique insights into its use. The possibility of Saruman claiming the ring also grew to occupy Sauron's strategic thinking, though in a different way. While Sauron had successfully corrupted the head of the White Council, he harbored no illusions about Saruman's ultimate loyalty. The wizard's betrayal of his own order demonstrated an ambition that made him both a useful ally and a dangerous potential rival. Saruman's extensive study of ring lore, combined with his formidable natural powers, meant he might actually succeed in wresting control of the ring from its maker, a possibility that led Sauron to keep careful watch on Isengard even as he collaborated with its master. Even more distant possibilities troubled the Dark Lord's calculations. Tom Bombadil, whose nature and powers remained mysterious even to Sauron, represented an unknown factor in the equation of power. Though Bombadil seemed uninterested in matters beyond his own borders, his demonstrated immunity to the ring's influence marked him as someone beyond Sauron's understanding, and therefore, potentially, beyond his power to predict or control. The Dark Lord's spies gave Bombadil's realm a wide berth, uncertain whether this strange being might one day choose to extend his influence beyond the Old Forest. But it was the rise of Aragorn that finally broke Sauron's strategic patience. This heir of ancient kings could unite the kingdoms of men, and his royal blood gave him the right to master the ring itself. The Dark Lord remembered well how Isildur had defeated him. Now Isildur's heir threatened to do the same. When Aragorn revealed himself through the Seeing Stone, Sauron abandoned all caution. He launched his war before his preparations were complete, divided his forces before their full strength was gathered, all to crush this threat before Aragorn could claim the ring. These fears drove Sauron to his doom. While he watched for mighty powers, while he fortified against great threats, he would miss the true danger, the 2 small hobbits creeping toward Mount Doom. Yet this blindness to humble threats revealed something far more fundamental about the Dark Lord's nature, something that had driven his actions since the beginning of time itself. Behind all these specific fears lay a deeper terror, the fear of becoming nothing. Sauron had walked Middle-earth since its creation. He had shaped its history, commanded its mightiest armies, built its greatest fortresses. The thought of fading into powerlessness, of becoming a mere shadow unable to affect the world, haunted him. With his immortal nature and vast knowledge, Sauron could have carved out a different existence. Even without returning to Valinor, he could have dwelt in Middle-earth as a being of tremendous power and wisdom, creating works of beauty that would have lasted until the world's end. But mere existence was not enough. He needed to dominate, to control, to ensure that nothing in Middle-earth could exist without his will shaping it. The fear of fading drove him to increasingly brutal measures. In territories he conquered, he would destroy remnants of former rule. Ancient statues were torn down, replaced with monuments to his power. Cities were rebuilt in the image of Barad-dûr. Even the land itself was transformed. Mountains hollowed for forges, rivers diverted to serve his fortresses. Nothing could remain that did not bear his mark. In the lands of Rhûn and Harad, he placed his own temples at the heart of every city. Local customs and beliefs were replaced with the worship of him and his master, Morgoth. Those who resisted disappeared into his dungeons, while those who embraced his rule were elevated to power. Through these measures, he ensured that children born in these lands would know no authority but his. The free peoples of Middle-earth particularly aroused his fury. The kingdoms of Gondor and Rohan maintained their own traditions, their own choices, their own ways of life. The elven realms preserved memories of ages before his rule. Even the humble Shire existed beyond his reach, its people living their simple lives without thought of his power. Each of these represented a challenge to his absolute dominion, proof that the world could exist without him. In Mordor, this obsession manifested in the very landscape. The plains of Gorgoroth was a monument to his power. Every rock placed by his slaves, every road built to his design. No plant grew without his permission. No creature moved without his knowledge. The air itself was fouled by his furnaces, creating an atmosphere that would kill any natural thing. He shaped his realm into a place where nothing could exist that he did not control. This terror of insignificance shaped his very warfare. When his armies attacked, they did not merely defeat, they erased. Cities were not just conquered, but remade. Populations were not just subjugated, but transformed through generations of followers and slavery. His orcs defiled ancient places, ensuring nothing remained of what came before. Every victory had to be absolute, permanent, irreversible. Like a tower built too tall, too rigid, too absolute, Sauron's empire contained within it the very elements of its collapse. And so it would be his own nature, his own fears, that sealed his fate. His terror of the ring's power being used against him consumed his thoughts completely. Every defense, every strategy, every calculation centered on preventing a mighty warrior or powerful wizard from claiming his ring and challenging his dominion. The threat of Aragorn leading an army to the Black Gate aligned perfectly with these fears. A noble king, a legendary sword, a host of warriors at his back. It was a threat Sauron understood, one that matched his own concepts of power and victory. But in focusing on these grand threats, he blinded himself to a different possibility altogether. While his eye searched for armies and champions, while his Nazgûl hunted for warriors who might wield his ring, two small hobbits crept through his realm, carrying with them the promise of its destruction. Only when Frodo claimed the ring at Mount Doom did Sauron finally understand. In that moment of terrible clarity, he realized his enemies had weaponized his own fears against him, using his obsession with power to blind him to their true purpose. But the realization came too late. The ring melted in the fires of Mount Doom, and all of Sauron's fears came true at once. His power crumbled, his armies scattered, his fortress fell. The great shadow of the East became nothing more than a shadow, powerless to affect even the smallest part of the world he had tried so desperately to control.